The breakfast rush had already killed me twice before 9 o'clock, and I still had 6 hours left on my shift. I was refilling coffee along the counter when I heard the door swing open behind me, letting in a gust of November air cold enough to make my teeth ache. I didn't turn around. At the Copper Kettle, you learned fast to keep moving. Every second you stopped was a second. Some other table noticed you and waved you down for something you'd already forgotten. Corner booth just sat down. My coworker called from the pass-through window. Looks like a big party. VIP type. I got it, I said automatically, because I always said I got it. That's how you make rent when you're averaging $4 an hour in base pay, and your daughter's winter coat has a busted zipper, and you've been putting off the dentist for 8 months, because the copay alone would wipe out what little you had in savings. My name is Cecily. I'm 29 years old. I'm the only parent my 6-year-old has ever really known, and for the past 3 years I have carried plates of eggs, Benedict and truffle fries, and bottomless mimosas at a brunch restaurant in downtown Chicago that I could never afford to eat at on my own time. I grabbed my order pad and turned toward the corner booth, and the world sort of tilted. There were 4 men in dark coats seated around the large round table in the back. 3 of them I'd never seen before. Big men, the kind who don't take up space so much as claim it. They sat with their backs straight and their eyes moving, and their hands very still, and even before I understood what I was looking at, some part of me recognized the energy. The way a room changes when someone dangerous walks into it. The 4th man was looking directly at me. I stopped walking. He didn't. He held my gaze across the length of the restaurant, and I felt it in my chest the way you feel turbulence on a plane. That dropping sensation. That instant of not knowing which way is up. His name was Stellan, and I had loved him so completely, so recklessly, so stupidly when I was 22 years old, that when he disappeared without a word, I genuinely didn't know for a few months whether I would survive it. That was 7 years ago. I made myself breathe. I made myself walk. "Good morning," I said when I reached the table. My voice came out even. I was proud of that. "Welcome to the Copper Kettle. Can I start you all with some coffee?" The 3 other men glanced at Stellan. He was still watching me. "Cecily," he said. Not a question. Just my name, in his voice, after 7 years of silence, in the middle of my Saturday morning shift. "Water for the table would be great," I said. "I'll give you a few minutes with the menus." I turned around and walked back to the service station and stood very still for exactly 4 seconds, gripping the edge of the counter. Then I picked up 4 water glasses and went back. I'd met Stellan Voss the summer before my senior year of college. He was 24, already working, and had the kind of confidence that didn't announce itself. It just existed quietly, like furniture that had always been there. We met at a friend's rooftop party in Wicker Park. He'd handed me a beer I hadn't asked for and said, "You've been staring at the skyline for 12 minutes. Either you hate everyone here or you're homesick." "Both," I said, and he laughed, and that was that. We were together for 2 years. I want to be careful when I say this, because I know how it sounds. But those 2 years were the realest I had ever felt. He was the first person I told about my dad leaving. He was the first person I let see me cry. We talked about everything, what we wanted, where we'd go, what kind of life we were building. He talked about opening his own business someday, some kind of logistics company. I talked about going back to school for nursing once I'd saved enough. None of it happened. The night before Thanksgiving, he told me he had to go deal with a family situation. He said it might take a while. He said he'd call. He didn't call. By Christmas, his number was disconnected. By spring, I had stopped expecting him. By the following fall, I was pregnant, terrified, and completely alone in a way I hadn't thought possible for someone who had loved and been loved the way I thought I had been. I never told him about the baby. There was no way to tell him. He had simply ceased to exist in my world, and I had to build a new one without him in it. My daughter's name is June. She has dark eyes and a stubborn way of holding her jaw that I've never been able to explain, because it doesn't come from my side. I had stopped asking myself where it came from. The big party at the corner booth ordered 3 rounds of coffee, a spread of food that totaled more than my weekly grocery budget, and said almost nothing to each other the entire time. The 3 other men ate quickly and efficiently. Stellan barely touched his plate. He watched me every time I came to the table. I kept my face neutral. I kept my voice professional. I asked if everything was all right with the food. I refilled coffees without being asked. I did my job. When I dropped the check, his hand caught mine. Not grabbing, just contact. The way you touch someone when you need them to stop moving for 1 second. I stopped. "I know I don't have the right to ask you anything," he said quietly. The other men had stepped away. I hadn't even noticed them leave. "But can you please just look at me?" I looked at him. He looked older. Of course he did. But there was something else, different about him. Something harder and more careful. The boy I had known wore his feelings on his face without seeming to realize it. This man kept his face very controlled, and the effort of that control was visible, like a locked door you could tell had been forced shut. "You left," I said. My voice was still even. I was still proud of that. "I know. You didn't call. I know I don't want an explanation, Stellan. I'm working right now, and I'm going to need my hand back so I can bring change to table 6. He let go. I went to table 6. When I came back to clear the corner booth, he was still sitting there, alone. There was a business card under the edge of his water glass, and underneath it, a cash tip that made my vision blur for a moment. I left the card. I took the money because June needed a winter coat. He came back the next Saturday, and the one after that. He always sat in my section. He always ordered coffee he barely drank and food he didn't finish. He always tipped the same way, too much, and in cash. The other men came sometimes and sometimes they didn't, but Stellan was always there, always watching. I started learning things about him through osmosis. The way you learn things in a city, not from asking, but from listening. One of the other servers dated someone who worked in finance downtown and recognized the men from the corner booth. She told me the name like it meant something, watching my face for a reaction. Stellan Voss ran an organization, not a legitimate one, or not entirely legitimate. She said the word that I didn't want to hear, the word that explained the men with careful eyes and very still hands, the word that explained why a 24-year-old kid from Bridgeport had disappeared overnight and resurfaced 7 years later in an expensive coat with a security detail. I stood in the walk-in cooler for 3 minutes after she told me. Then I went back out on the floor because the lunch rush doesn't pause for personal crises. The Saturday after that, he was waiting outside when my shift ended. Not hovering, not aggressive, just standing near the door, hands in his coat pockets, like a man who had learned how to be patient. "I'm not interested," I said, walking past him. "I know," he said, falling into step beside me. "I'm not asking for anything, Cecily. I just want to. I need you to know why I left." "I spent a long time needing that," I said. "I don't anymore. Please." Something in how he said it made me stop. Maybe it was the word itself. Plain, undecorated, nothing performed about it. Or maybe it was that I was tired, and the wind off the lake was cutting right through my coat, and I had 4 more minutes until I had to pick June up from my neighbors, and I just didn't have the energy to keep walking away from someone standing still. 5 minutes, I said. We sat on a bench outside the parking garage. The city moved around us, indifferent. He told me his uncle had been in trouble. Not regular trouble. The kind of trouble that came with threats and debts, and people who collected both with a specific kind of violence. His uncle had raised him after his parents died. He was the only family Stellan had. When the call came, there was no version of staying that kept his uncle alive and me safe at the same time. "I should have told you," he said. "Yes. I didn't know how to protect you and tell you the truth simultaneously. I made a choice. It was the wrong one. You decided what I could handle," I said. Without asking me, he was quiet. "That's what makes it unforgivable," I said. "Not that you left, that you decided for me." He nodded slowly, like he'd already known that was the answer, like he'd been carrying the knowledge of it for a long time. "Is there someone?" he asked after a moment. "That's not a question you get to ask me. You're right," he stood, buttoning his coat. "I'm sorry, Cecily, for all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything." He walked away. I sat on that bench in the November wind for another few minutes, telling myself the tightness in my chest was just the cold. The trouble started on a Tuesday. I got to the restaurant for my opening shift and found out my schedule had been cut. Not fired, just cut. 3 shifts down to 1. The manager looked uncomfortable delivering the news, and wouldn't meet my eyes, and I'd been in the working world long enough to know what that meant. It hadn't been his idea. I went home and paid the bills I could and looked at the ones I couldn't and sat at my kitchen table for a long time while June slept down the hall. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "How did you get this number?" I said when I picked up. "I'm sorry about your shifts," Stellan said. "That wasn't supposed to happen." Someone on my side made an assumption. "I'm handling it. You're having me followed." "No, I'm aware of things. It's different. It is absolutely not different." I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. "You don't get to monitor my life, Stellan. You don't get to insert yourself into my schedule or my finances or anything else. You gave up that access 7 years ago." "I know. Stop coming to the restaurant." Silence. "Okay," he said. He didn't come the next Saturday, or the one after. My shifts came back, all 3 of them. No explanation offered, none asked for. I told myself it was just the normal way things went, that schedules fluctuated, that it was a coincidence. I'm not sure I believed myself. June got sick in December. Not dramatically, not all at once. It started as a cold that didn't quite clear. Then a cough that settled in her chest, then a fever that spiked on a Thursday night and sent me to the emergency room at 11 o'clock, with my daughter bundled in her coat and her stuffed elephant tucked under her arm because she refused to go anywhere without it. The ER was loud and fluorescent and smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. I signed forms and answered questions, and watched them take her temperature again, and held her hand while she looked up at me with big dark eyes that trusted me completely to make this okay. She had pneumonia, not severe. They said it was caught early, that she'd be fine with antibiotics and rest and a follow-up in a week, but she needed to be admitted overnight for observation. And I had to call my neighbor to feed my cat and call my manager to explain why I wouldn't be in Friday, and I sat in that plastic hospital chair next to my daughter's small bed, and I did not let myself cry until she fell asleep. Then I cried very quietly into my hands for approximately 4 minutes, and then I stopped because I had things to do. The hospital bill arrived 6 weeks later. My insurance covered most of it. Most is a word that sounds better than it actually is when you're staring at what's left. I picked up an extra catering shift on weekends. I sold some things I'd been meaning to sell anyway. I made the math work, barely, the way I'd been making the math work for 3 years, with spreadsheets and sacrifice, and a particular kind of stubbornness that I'd learned from necessity. I did not think about Stellan. I thought about Stellan constantly. He found me in February outside June's school. I saw the car first, the same black car parked half a block away, and then I saw him standing a respectful distance from the school entrance, not looking at the kids, looking at me. I walked over. "You need to leave," I said. "I know." He wasn't moving. I heard she was sick. "I'm sorry." "How did you?" I stopped. "You said you're aware of things." "Yes, that is not something I'm going to be comfortable with, Stellan. That is not something any reasonable person would be comfortable with. I know that too." He looked at the school entrance, then back at me. His jaw was very tight. "I've been trying to figure out how to stop, and I can't seem to do it. I'm not asking for permission. I'm just telling you the truth." "The truth," I repeated. "I've been in love with you since you were 22 years old and standing on a rooftop in Wicker Park, telling a stranger you were homesick and hated everyone at the party." His voice didn't change. The same quiet, controlled delivery. That didn't stop when I left. It didn't stop when I should have let it. I don't know how to make it stop. I looked at him for a long time. "You have to go," I said finally, "because my daughter is about to come out those doors and I can't have this conversation in front of her." "Okay." "But," I stopped, started again. "She has a music recital in 2 weeks, at the school. It's open to anyone." I don't know why I said it. I genuinely do not know. I turned around and walked back to wait for June, and I didn't look back at the car. And when the doors opened and she came running out in her purple backpack with her hair falling out of its ponytail, I picked her up and held on just slightly too long. "Mommy," she said into my shoulder, "you're squishing me." "I know, baby, hang on." He came to the recital. He sat in the back, alone, no security detail, just a man in a dark coat, in a gymnasium, full of parents and siblings and grandparents, all of us squished into tiny folding chairs, watching first and second graders perform hot cross buns on recorder with the solemn concentration of orchestral musicians. June played her part and then looked out at the audience, and her face lit up the way it does when she's found what she was looking for. And I thought she'd spotted my neighbor who'd promised to come. But she was looking at the back row. She was looking at a man she had never met, and she was smiling at him. And he was smiling back. And the expression on his face was something I hadn't seen since he was 24 years old and didn't yet know how to hide things. I sat very still in my tiny folding chair and felt the world tilt again. Differently, this time. Not with the shock of recognition, but with something that scared me more. A kind of reckoning. After the recital, June skipped over to me and grabbed my hand, and then, because she is 6 and fearless and has never met a stranger in her life, turned and beamed at the man who had materialized a few feet away. "Did you see me play?" she demanded. "I did," he said. He crouched down to her level. "You were the best one up there." "That's not true," she said sagely. "Tyler was better. But I didn't mess up at all." "That's actually the better accomplishment," he said. She considered this. Then she said, "Do you know my mom?" "I do," he said. He looked up at me. "A long time ago. Before I was born?" "Yes." "Were you friends?" He kept his eyes on mine. "Something like that." June nodded, satisfied, and turned to show me a drawing she'd made during the second graders' performance. I took it from her with hands that were almost completely steady. When I looked back up, Stellan was still watching me. And for the first time in 7 years, his face wasn't controlled. All of it was right there. The recognition, the longing, the specific grief of someone looking at a life they stepped away from and seeing clearly, for the first time, everything it contained. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I looked at my daughter, her dark eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way she stood with her weight on one hip, exactly the way I had never once stood in my life. And I understood that this conversation was coming whether I was ready for it or not. "Can you?" I started. "Yes," he said before I finished. "You don't know what I was going to ask, no, but the answer is still yes." I exhaled. "Coffee," I said. "Not at the restaurant. Somewhere else. We need to talk." He nodded. I took June's hand. She started telling me about Tyler's recorder technique, in the detailed, analytical way she approached most subjects, and I listened to her, and I walked, and somewhere behind us, I knew he was watching us go. And I knew, not happily, not with any particular grace, that some things that have been unfinished for 7 years don't stay unfinished forever. They wait, they grow edges, they become something you have to face in a gymnasium under fluorescent lights in front of 30 families eating Rice Krispie treats. The real conversation hadn't happened yet. But for the first time since he'd walked back into my life through that restaurant door, I wasn't walking away from it. Neither of us was.